Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is I, Imperial Dane, with another Propagandacast for you. And today, somewhere in the French countryside, we have a 1 versus 1 on Langres. Langres, the ever French, I suppose. Not entirely sure what to say. And as the contenders, we have HautpmannKarl of Kampfgruppe Karl ready to beat back. And who will the allies be? It will be UrSoUl of the British 30th Corps, 20th Infantry Division, I suppose, or Brigade, who knows, I'm not entirely sure this time around, but certainly British, certainly of the infamous British 30th Corps, pushing forwards towards Caen in the hopes of taking that magnificent city which used to be that of William the Conqueror. Now, let's get started, shall we? And as they are drawing up their beginning positions, we of course have the winding roads separating the map nicely in the western and eastern half, with the central victory point right at the crossroads. We have the other close to the enemy base, to the respective bases, and some medium yield fuel points on the east, single one in the west, but a high yield munitions point right in this small farm area, and this also being rather defensible. And if the British start in the south as they do, they have a tendency of trying to close off this gap and then place a mortar pit right there, meaning they can protect this part and basically have it a much easier time than, say, for example, if they were to attack from here. And of course any in the northern half is going to find it a lot more difficult to actually deal with this, in particular if then the British decide to set up their truck there, meaning any troops can quickly be retreated, reinforced to deal with anyone trying to take away the mortar pit. So that can be a bit problematic, to be honest. But let us see how this goes. HautpmannKarl securing the nearby territories and points. Panzer Grenadiers working on seizing territory as well. Perhaps not their best use right away, but sometimes it can be what is needed, although I'd certainly try and take out any British troops that might be on their own, although UrSoUl does seem to have the trick together and stick his infantry sections together, granting them a lot of firepower. 10 British infantrymen, quite dangerous, quite powerful in fact, and can be quite a handful to deal with. And we already see one Panzer Grenadier down to sniper fire, further Panzer Grenadiers moving in to try and stop this, but against 10 British infantrymen, they're really going to have to get out of there sooner or later before they are torn apart. Already 2 Panzer Grenadiers down, 3 Panzer Grenadiers down, and only 1 British infantryman dead or wounded. In this case wounded. It seems like certainly not a good trade-off, in particular as Panzer Grenadiers are quite expensive to reinforce. They are finally getting out of here, although already expensive losses have been incurred at this moment. And we see the recon section setting up a slit trench, and this is something they currently can do in this patch, but from the next patch onwards that will not happen. And I don't believe they should be actually be able to set up in enemy territory, but I do believe they might have actually used this quite slight bordering into the neutral territory to set it up. A bit curious actually. And we see a lieutenant dashing forwards with his Sten gun, firing away at the kitten crowd, which doesn't really notice him at all, casually moving onwards. And we see a Panzer Grenadier force charging forwards once more. Recon section quickly rushing into the slit trench, gaining a lot of protection of course, but of course at the same time mobilizing themselves, and of course setting themselves up for any munitions being dumped into their trench, like for example, say, incendiary grenades, which HautpmannKarl is researching now, since he knows he will need to do something to get these British out of their trenches. We see the lieutenant getting overcome by Panzer Grenadiers and forced to retreat before he is put to the sword, I suppose, in a sense, although more likely put to the rifle bullet from the Kar 98K.
Kampfgruppe can now use incendiary grenades.
And we see the infantry moving quite negative cover, moving across their bad idea, in particular in face of such overwhelming firepower. Already have lost 2 infantrymen, or 3 in fact, 2 being the numbers that is left, and they are heavily wounded. And we see the other section holding the trench. Of course, at the same time, it's perhaps not going to do so much in the face of this many Panzer Grenadiers with incendiary grenades. They might actually be overwhelmed and taken out in short order. And there we go, Panzer Grenadiers charging ahead, some wounded, some gone, and we see the incendiary grenades being lobbed. Too a bit excessive, I think, but it's certainly going to get the job done. And not pulling out of the slit trench, apparently, not even abandoning it temporarily, instead remaining all the troops in there and seeing them being scorched alive. That is certainly a bad maneuver. One section out and apparently quickly moving in the other, instead of just clicking the trench and then pressing delete, in which case the trench will be blown up and the infantry section will be able to quickly retreat. And of course, at the same time, you will have denied the slit trench to the enemy. Instead, he wastes 2 infantry sections on this and instead gives the trench to the Panzer Grenadiers. A bit of a waste, I dare say. That's certainly 900 manpower down the drain, which is indeed quite a lot. And we see Panzer Grenadiers once more moving out, these sticking in the trench for now. Although I don't think they should expect much opposition, since currently UrSoUl only has an infantry section, and more particularly a recon section and a lieutenant. A supply truck has, or support truck I mean, has arrived, but it's not even trying to use some of these nearby points for at least some extra fuel or munitions. And in fact, the British currently doesn't have much territory, but looks like HautpmannKarl has lost all motivation or initiative and has just decided to sit back, not even trying to seize this strategic point or this, but apparently take a nap while the British are busy setting up emplacements with all haste. And this is something that can happen if you wait around too long. Your opponent will begin setting up defenses as quickly as possible. In this case, we do see the mortar emplacement behind the hedgerows and the MG emplacement here, meaning he's certainly going to have a lot easier time holding this area and bombarding this. Of course, leaving this as the only viable spot for incursion. Well, this as well, which could certainly mean that if the British player knows what he's doing, could also set something to face there, or at least most of his infantry. But again, most of the infantry is currently dead. Not even a casualty clearing station to try and recover some of the losses. So not looking good for the British player in particular, if Mr. HautpmannKarl can push forwards and put up enough sufficient pressure. And there we go, 3-inch mortar firing away, and we see the recon section charging ahead. Oh dear, get those Panzer Grenadiers away before they are lost. Barely making it out of there.
Germany is conceding a sector point to the Commonwealth.
And we hear more thuds from the mortar emplacements. Rounds so far not having appeared. Still not appearing. Recon sections once more seizing this territory, and we see the lieutenant hanging around, being a bit dashing, I suspect. Panzer Grenadiers seizing the territory without any interference. Not entirely sure what that mortar emplacement is hitting. Oh, there we go, rounds hitting there. Apparently trying to clear out those trenches, except there's no one in them, so that's actually a bit of a waste. And we see the recon section trying to move forwards, and we see a mortar half drag out from the German Kampfgruppe, ready to apply its own mortar rounds to the enemy. Certainly advantageous. And we see a captain out, meaning most likely some sort of steward is going to be acquisitioned by the British in an attempt to turn things around, since currently the German commander does not have any anti-tank assets, no Panzerschrecks and no anti-tank half-tracks to provide protection. British charging ahead, lieutenant and captain in support. That's certainly a bit unusual, since the captain is more of a defensive officer, can buff the health and I believe other stats of emplacements, and of course infantry as well, although it does only applies to sectors that actually belongs to the British. And we see the Kettenkrat has snuck in behind here, seizing the British victory point, although he hasn't secured the one close to his own base. Bit curious. We see sappers out, in fact, going straight for the captain and then getting sappers. A bit curious. And a Bofors 40mm cannon, Swedish AA gun. Although not much air power at this moment in combat appears for the Axis, so it's certainly not going to do much. It's going to have a much easier time dealing with the Panzer Grenadiers and their numerous half-tracks and other light vehicles. Half-track moving ahead into the range of the Vickers machine gun emplacement. And what will we see? Mortar rounds hitting among the sappers who have been equipped with Piats, forcing them to pull out. And we see also incendiary rounds going off, but missing quite. Besides, not really doing anything though. Could have been well done if it could have hit this, but such was not to be. And now the Bofors is up, ready to take on any threats. Although, of course, if any infantry can actually get close to it, it's not going to be too effective any longer, since it's only accurate at longer ranges. And we hear the Panzer Support Command upgrade is complete, meaning he can get Panzer IVs to support him. We see the captain apparently still sticking close to the British infantry sections. A bit curious. And what is this in here? Is it? Yes, indeed. Apparently the lieutenant has decided to billet himself in here and have a nice hot cup of tea for some curious reason. Not sure why. And we see the sappers with Piats joining up as well, apparently going to make a dash into enemy territory or set up a 17-pounder anti-tank gun. The 17-pounder being one of the most powerful anti-tank weapons during the war. So powerful, in fact, that the British decided they wanted to mount it on everything they could. One of the things being the Firefly, which is also in the game. Another being a Cromwell variant, being called the A30 Challenger. M10s were also equipped with this, which became the Achilles. And I also suspect they tried to mount it on a Churchill, but that was dropped. We see the British trying to mount another assault with mortar fire and support, but not doing much. And for some reason, the 17-pounder pointing in the wrong direction, but now being pointed in a slightly more helpful line of fire instead of right into the hedgerows. Won't do much, but now it can discourage any enemy assaults and of course make any movement in this area a bit difficult. Now the British sneaking through here.
We've completed the upgrades, Command.
Panzer IV taking 17-pounder rounds straight to the side, but quickly out of the arc of fire again, engaging the British infantry. And I'm a bit curious as to why HautpmannKarl has not mounted any attacks through here, since for, well, the record, there's not really much to actually hold him back there. But what is this? We see a commando raid behind enemy lines right near the forward barracks of the Kampfgruppe. Certainly not looking good with the British Sten guns firing away at these Panzer Grenadiers, doing a lot of damage already. Pineapple grenades going off as well, but now mortar fire is joining in, knocking out the glider and killing one